Well, Tony, I think we're a couple minutes past 10, so why don't we go ahead and get started here. So thanks everybody for participating. Our guest for this month's program, as you know, is Tony Smith, president of Secure Futures. And Tony brings a wealth of experience and knowledge from the solar industry to this talk, and has been at the helm of Secure Futures since founding the company in 2004. And Tony, thanks for participating today and joining us.
Well, thank you. Pleasure. And I always love to talk about bah humbug and sheep. Just by way of quick background, Secure Futures is a solar developer. We're based in Stanton, Virginia, and have offices in Richmond. And we've innovated PPAs in 2010 in Virginia, and have part of our trademark is innovative customer solutions. And in this instance, in developing a project with Carilion New River Medical Center, we were proposing to develop 7 acres of land with a megawatt plus of solar array, a tracking array, which had been farmed, land that had been leased to a nearby farmer, 7th generation farmer in that region. And he was thrilled, actually, that there was going to be a solar array placed on that land as opposed to a new building. So he's very pro-solar. But we also want to make a commitment to retaining the land in agricultural use. And so as we were looking at ways to manage vegetation, we came upon solutions that have been developed in other parts of the world, and notably North Carolina, Texas, California, and especially New Zealand, which is probably the world's capital for sheep farming. And we learned through this that sheep farming, solar sheep is a very beneficial approach to vegetation management for solar arrays. It's a win-win-win solution. For the solar developer, it means much lower maintenance costs, it's a much more sustainable approach to vegetation management. For the farmer, it provides additional pasture for rotational grazing of their sheep. And as it turns out, solar arrays, since they provide shading for the sheep, actually reduce the heat stress for the sheep and reduces illness due to parasites. So before we started, as we were developing this project, we consulted with Virginia County Extension agents in that region to find out what they would advise in terms of the type of grass that we should plant, the kind of mix, and we discovered that sheep really like clover.
Okay.
Should avoid bluegrass, which is the native grass there. And we discovered that it would be best if we did that right after we graded the arrays, but before we planted the vertical posts, so that it could be done mechanically more easily.
Now, is that a difficult type of vegetation to keep grown there? Or is it essentially, once it's established, it's there and the sheep are maintaining it?
We also had soil tests done for that land to make sure it was the right pH to support that kind of clover.
Yeah.
And each year, the farmer spreads a little more seeds just to help maintain, but it's pretty much self-sustaining.
Yeah.
And farmer introduces the sheep. Oh, the other benefit for the farmer is that we enclose the array with a 7-foot-high chain link fence, which is a normal standard operating procedure for solar arrays to keep people out, but it also keeps out foxes and coyotes.
And it's not, and that's more protection than they would normally have, I would assume,
Absolutely.
In your average field. So it's not anything additional for you all, but it creates a better environment.
It's a better environment that the farmer normally can provide himself. So he's able to, we're introduced to the leader of the Regional Sheep Association, And as it turns out, he was very interested in bringing his flock at no cost to us. So he introduces the sheep, brings the water pans, and the sheep are there from May to November. And then he removes the sheep so that the grass can regenerate over the next 6 months, and then he brings them back. So the sheep are tremendous mowers. The other stipulation was to keep the lowest portion of the array 38 inches off the ground so the sheep could run easily underneath the arrays, even when it was in the near vertical position.
Yeah, so and that's an important point, Tony, that I wanted to talk about is sort of what, if you do have to take special design considerations into your design for this type of use. Do you have to specifically design a project for sheep grazing? And it sounds like you do have to make sure that you've got enough height.
Enough height to plant the seeds before you introduce the solar array to make it easier to do. Yeah.
Okay. Are we talking a substantial height difference, or is it really just a slightly higher than what would normally be designed?
Higher than you would normally do.
So there is some planning involved. This isn't something you can plug into a pre-existing facility necessarily, but not a substantial design change.
No, and it was really at no additional cost. The additional 4 inches was already built into the spectrum of possibilities as far as the vertical posts. And
the other consideration you mentioned previously was wiring, and I would think about that, having live animals around there. Is there a lot of threat of the sheep chewing on the wiring?
Not a lot of threat, but they're naturally curious, and so you want to keep curiosity at bay by strapping the wires a bit higher than their normal head height, just to keep that out of the way. Unlike goats, which would be a real problem.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine from a chewing and a climbing perspective.
Yeah, definitely. No goats.
That's right. So Tony, you mentioned cost savings as one of the benefits, and I think that's one of the obvious ones. But one of the benefits that we had talked about previously that I think is really important and isn't clear on the surface is the community relationship benefit that you get out of keeping this agricultural land in agricultural use and use by a local farmer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Actually, that's a good point, Collin, because when we approached the county for special use exemption for the solar array, and they learned, A, that the solar array was to supply electricity to the host customer and not to the grid in general, but B, that we were going to maintain the land in agricultural use with solar sheep. It was a win-win situation, and they were incredibly supportive and said for the reasons of maintaining agricultural use, we had absolutely no issues. And this is a challenge for a lot of utility scale projects in winning community support. And our experience is that if you work with the local farming community in a proactive way, not simply just greenwashing, but actually engaging them in the operations and maintenance of the facility, you'll do a lot better.
Yeah, and I think that's what the aspect that made this topic really interesting to me is as we see a lot more growth of solar, which is great here in Virginia, especially. I think we're going to have to see more creative approaches to problems like this and creative approaches to community engagement, just as the number of facilities increase, just to try to sort of address some of these hurdles.
Yeah, and the beauty in terms of our approach is to partner with someone who's a resident expert on sheep farming, not to try to become sheep farmers ourselves.
That's right.
Just to work with someone who really knows about sheep, is totally invested in it, and marry our need with our solution with his need and his solution with our need.
Yeah, and keeping it as simple as possible, right? I mean, you guys are experts in solar. You don't need to be experts in sheep.
And we're saving money. I mean, it would have cost us easily $3,000 to $5,000 a year to be in do mechanical mowing, plus the use of petrochemicals and so forth. Here, it's virtually no cost, and for the farmer, it's a real benefit. So
Yeah.
it's
So is this, and this is, we're coming up on our time here, but just kind of as a last idea here, Tony, this project I think is a 1.3 megawatt, so it's about 7 acres or so. So not a huge project. Is this activity, in your experience, something that could be scalable for larger projects as well, or is it more of a small project type of activity?
well, it is it would be very scalable. Again, we can learn from New Zealand farmers who really introduced the whole concept of rotational grazing to farmers all over the world. And you can, through movable electric fences, move sheep from one paddock to another very easily. And you could do, 100-acre project with different herds of sheep using rotational grazing, and again, relying on the farmer to manage that whole process.
Yeah. So it's really just a matter of getting connected with the right farmer or farmers and allowing them to use their expertise there. And really the same considerations for you as a solar developer and the slight design change, and that's about it.
Sure, and then with the placement of webcams, which we have, you can actually set up a screensaver to watch sheep moving across underneath the array. And in these COVID times, we need more ways to find therapeutic relaxation.
Yeah, so there's another benefit right there. Perfect. Well, Tony, we're a little bit over our time here, so thank you again for joining and taking the time to talk about this. It's a really great project and a neat use, and I think an important use for future development as we see more and more here in Virginia. So thanks again for taking the time.
It's a pleasure. Herlock sessions, they're really very beneficial, and I'm honored to be part of it.
Absolutely appreciate that. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending, and we hope to see you next time.
Great. Bye now.
Thank you.